is being presented to you by the co-founder of Makuta VFX, India's proud child. Yes, there was a bit of a clap coming, and then why did it stop? You know, I'm sure all of you are quite familiar with this, but then a couple of more names could elicit more applause, I guess. Magathira, Iga, Bahubali, does that elicit more applause? Yes, so India's own VFX studio that has gone truly international, and the co-founder of Makuta VFX himself is here, Mr. Pete Draper.
So hi, my name's Pete Draper. I'm the co-founder and CEO of a company called Makuta Visual Effects. We're a VFX studio based out of Hyderabad. We founded around 10 years ago almost, off the back of a film called Magadira, which was another Rajamouli film, one of several. Help me. So just to give you a rough rundown of the sort of things that we do, this is what we do. Audio, please. There's a few things you might see in there. Thank you. So what I want to talk to you tonight is basically the progression of how one goes through from getting a script all the way through to visual effects completion. So there's several processes that one tends to go through, very, very much heavily design orientated. Yeah, a bottle will be okay, but all right. Thank you. Yeah, let's put that there. Okay, so in essence, it's roughly titled Script to Screen, or How Not to Go Mad Doing It, or at least Try Not to. So this is all very much a fluid process that one tends to go through. When you do go through, you get a script dropped to you, and breaking down the visual effects, breaking down what's required from the client side, what's required from the production side, what stuff can be done, what stuff can't be done, and how to achieve the director's vision directly on camera. So the first thing that one tends to go through is what's called a script analysis. And that is literally going down and breaking down every single line, every single piece of dialogue, every single descriptive piece of information that one tends to get in a script, and determine and break it down into manageable sections and determine what can be done and what needs to be done as far as post-production is concerned. Okay? So from that point, you can roughly determine load and general sorts of aesthetics using brief descriptions from the client side as to what one needs to achieve in frame. But that's not really enough information for us. Okay, you want it looking like I want this thing to explode. Okay, how? How do you want it to explode? Do you want it to explode this way? Do you want it to explode this way? The building needs to crash. Okay, how does it need to crash? This thing needs to crash into this thing. How do you want it? Give us some ideas. Give us some breakdowns of the sort of thing you want to look like. Okay? So reference is king here. First thing you tend to ask for is something what's called a mood board. Now, those of you in design fields, you know what these sorts of things are. In essence, it's getting and collating a collage. And in essence, what we used to do back in the day when we were doing pen and paper work and a lot of organic work is to just literally print everything out and stick it on a wall. Hence, board. You can do this digitally now. There's various pieces of software out there. We just tend to use the standard off-the-shelf stuff just to get the artist to get into the same mindset as yourself and the rest of the clients. So pulling out these references for each scene or key element is requested or researched if none are provided and presented by the client. So this can take a while. This can take quite a substantial amount of time because you go through a lot of iterations and a lot of decisions, a lot of indecisions, but the aim here, the key thing here is trying to lock the person down, the decision maker, to say, right, this is what I want. This is what I want to achieve. Not, I'm not sure, because that doesn't help anybody. Especially when you've got it 40 feet wide on a big screen, you've gone through all these processes and you've got to the DI stage and went, well, that's not what I kind of wanted. Well, you should have told us this a year and a half ago. Be clear about what you want to achieve, and therefore one can get what one wants at the end of the day. So going through this process and locking this down is very critical at the early stages so that everybody's on the same page. You break that down now. So everything the entire script gets broken down into a document. Obviously, we've done a dummy one here with The Empire Strikes Back. I would have loved to have worked on that. I obviously didn't, because by then I was 6. So I didn't start out that early. So you break it down into the required components, you break it down into, you can't really see it on this slide unfortunately, but you're basically determining the VFX work required, what assets are necessary, how many total works there are, and so on for each key element that's necessary for that particular either shot, scene, or film. So once you've got everything broken down, the assumption can be sent across to the production side, so the direction department, so that they can then confirm or reject. So in essence, what we're trying to get here at this particular point in time is clarity. We're trying to get an understanding and a clear picture of exactly what's happening, and are we correct in our assumptions, or are we wrong? If we're wrong, tell us. If we're right, great, let's sign it off and push on. At this particular stage, we can start blocking out something called a project tracking systems. Now again, some of you may be aware of these things. There are several available. So you can utilize either an off-the-shelf system, or you can customize and create your own. There's open source options available for you, but having some form of trusted system is essential to keep track of everything that's happening, because there's so many things. There's so many departments required to actually create a single frame of visual effects work. And keeping track of all those things is literally a mammoth task. It's the reason why if you sit through the credit roll at the end of a film, you'll see maybe as about 50% of the people in a visual effects credit list is production managers. They are those who are organizing and trying to sort out exactly what's happening and what's going on within each department. So at this particular stage, you can start building, populating it at this stage so you can determine roughly what your deliveries are going to be like, and keep updating it. Just like if you're trying to organize your own life and trying to get everything that's actually out of your head and onto a trusted system, something like the GTD system, for example, the Getting Things Done system, getting it out of your head and getting it onto something tangible is a lot easier. You don't have to remember these things. You have something that's there, that's physical or digital, that you can refer back to. So the more you keep this up to date, the easier your life is going to be in the end. And yes, the producer will want to know every single thing. Where are we at this project at this time? If you can expose certain things, or you can keep them refined, or you can expose everything to them as what is necessary, as what they request. This is the pain in the backside part. This is the really, do you bite yourself? Do you kick yourself in the teeth here? Because at this particular time, you've got producers, as a general rule, don't understand how visual effects works and how it's budgeted and how it needs to be created and how that can affect costs. So there are literally 3 options here. One is the price per minute. One is either per shot, using a menu system. A menu system is, in essence, is it easy, medium, hard, simple paintwork, etc., anything to like 10,000 guys are rolling on horseback over the side of a hill, kicking the crap out of each other? Or is it based on per mandate? The fairest to the visual effects studio is the last one. The fairest to the production is the first one. And the reason for that is that they will ask you, okay, right, how much for 30 minutes worth of visual effects? How much for a meal? How much for a house? How much for a taxi journey? You don't know unless you know the full criteria. So determining exactly what a budget is based on something that's, okay, how much per minute? Okay, I can give you a minute's worth of a rotating box. It will take me 10 seconds to create. It will cost you like pennies. Or I can, again, give you a minute of 10,000 guys on horseback kicking the crap out of each other, and it will cost you a lot more. So give me information, which is one of the reasons why we actually go through that breakdown initially. And if they insist on doing that, take an average based on the requirements that has already been broken down for you, which you can base on, obviously, your mandate rate. Take that, average it, you get that. Okay? So, a lot of productions like to be presented this way. We like to work this way because if there are changes, we can bill extra, which is always nice. That sometimes happens. So, breaking down your assets. In essence, your assets is your rigging, your 3D model, your texturing, your general, in essence, building props, you're building characters, you're building people, etc., etc. So these need to be really costed outside of the primary duration because otherwise it's like building an entire set physically and shooting it for one scene. That's a very expensive set to build. Same principle can be applied into visual effects. You're building an asset for just one scene. So you really want to cost these things out of there, otherwise you end up with a massive amount of cut. You're robbing Peter to pay Paul for the rest of the film otherwise. So you've got to be very careful on that. At this stage we're starting to get into concept work. So from the initial mood boards and all that kind of stuff, we're getting into concept work. This is some of the concept stuff that we did for Eager and some stuff for Bolgatty as well. So you go through these several rounds and rounds and rounds, and these can take a very, very long time. So this can take as long as it takes so everybody is on the same page. This is cheap. This is cost effective. This will save you money later on in the day because at the end of the day, what you're getting into, you're more people, you're getting more direction, a more focused result. So if you're a little bit vague at this point, it's okay. It'll cost a little bit, but you're only working a couple of guys on this thing, as opposed to hundreds of people actually producing the final work. So it's a lot more cost effective at this stage. So from the initial concept work, you can start blocking things with regards to how a visual on a shot wants to look like, how the end aesthetic wants to look, something that the direction department wants to actually achieve. I don't know why there's a pirate ship in there, but I think we went through Pirates of the Caribbean at the time. So you can get an idea of the sort of aesthetic that needs to be driven to end up with the end result. Okay, so this is something that we can all refer back to, the director can refer back to, so it's like, right, you did the concept work, make it look like the concept work. The lighting, the framing, the shading, the composition, everything needs to be trying to achieve that, or is allowing some flexibility as required. From that stage, you can start breaking it down even further and basically storyboarding it. Now, there's some directors who just like to not lock themselves down at this stage. I don't like storyboards because it's restricting me when I get to set work. Others love it. There's one director named Edgar Wright. He did Hot Fuzz, Shaun of the Dead, Scott Pilgrim, etc. And he loves storyboarding to a point where I think a relative of his will block out every single shot of an entire film, edit it, stick a rough scratch track over the top, and he's got his entire film before he even goes to floor. That's the reason why his work is so slick, the transitions are so nice, and everything looks seamless. Because it's been planned to its nth degree before you even go to floor. As a result, your shooting schedule reduces, your budget can be reduced as well for your primary shoot, because you're spending less time messing around on the floor and experimenting there when you actually know exactly what you're going to be doing from the get-go. So this will basically help you by blocking out every single key sequence that requires VFX, or you can do the entire film if you like, and you can rough all this out. So this can take, again, several rounds because it requires more departments to take decisions, like, for example, the camera departments, the direction departments, the art departments, and obviously visual effects as well. So the end result here is to try and achieve something that is in essence that we're going to try and get at the end of the day, at the end of the film. So getting this entire thing, taking those images, blocking it into keyframes if you want to go that route, you can then get everything down in a timeline and see how it's going to work. If it's going to look good, if it's going to look bad, it's at that stage you can still rough things around a little bit. From that, you're getting into something called pre-visualization. That's in essence a rough scratch 3D animatic that's going to give you an idea of the sort of thing that you're going to get in the end of the day. So in essence, you're taking the 2D sketches, the frames, the things that you've locked down there, and trying to block it into this. Now this works well, not just for full CG shots like this, but it also works for live action ones, because the good thing about doing it in previs is that you have an idea on lensing. From lensing, you can have an idea on grips. So if you've got some weird swooping camera work going on there, you can, therefore, at the end of the day, block out exactly how you need to shoot something, what the angles are going to be like, what the actual grip needs to be. If it's physically possible for you to get the live action element of that shot, you've got this amazing sweeping angle for a camera, that looks beautiful. Can you shoot it? Or do you need some specialized rig, Wirecam, drone, bolt camera, whatever it may be, to be able to achieve that shot itself? From this pre-visualization, you can also reverse engineer a lot of stuff. So there was a few scenes in Bolgatty where we actually had to have several guys rising up on elephants and so on. Now, doing character animation is time-consuming, it's expensive. So one tries to, especially within the South industry, it's less cost-effective to actually do it as a full 3D character than actually doing it as a live plate with a composite. So we need to know exactly how these elephants are going to rise up, what the angles are, and so on, and the timing. So based on the 3D model that we'd already animated, that we'd done in the first film, this was then reverse engineered and determined, and a rig could be built so that all the characters within the actual live shoot were just all sat on blue rigs, which was very Heath Robinson, very kind of pulley, and looked like they were going to fall apart any second. But they worked out, and the timing was perfect, and everybody got locked down. It was really, really good at the end. Same deal with actually doing things like camera work. We're determining here at this particular point in time where the actual position of a camera needs to be relative to a character, because in this particular one, we actually ended up having to replace a stunt double's head with the hero in one scene in the second film. Who's seen the second film, just out of interest? Put your hands up. Bolgatty 2, who's seen it? Those who have not seen it? Who's not seen it? Spoilers. So, sorry about that. There's a scene in there that we call the Angry Bird shot that we love doing, because it basically stuff blows up, which is always fun. After that, he hits, rolls, and flips, and lands. Now, the original idea was that he was going to slide down the ramp, which is a straightforward shot, didn't need a stunt guy, But by that time, the hero had knackered his arm up. His shoulder was, his rotator cuff was totally bust. So he couldn't lie down and get dragged. So therefore, we got another guy, a guy called Nico, who's like 6'4", built like a tree, and we had to replace his head. So we couldn't replace and repeat the same camera work. What we needed to do was try and make sure that the hero's head was in the same locked place, but we reverse engineered it so that we could actually just shift the camera to get the same angle and get the same light pass and so on. So this is in essence reverse engineering, going through tracking process and determining exactly where the guy's head needs to be. So when it actually comes to things like that, we can obviously, we can calculate these things, or we can reverse engineer these very, very neatly. Prevising things into shots also works very, very well, where we can actually design things that don't exist in the real world. Case in point, we have a scene here where we're approaching Kuntala, where, fun fact, there was a scene directly after this which was actually cut because of length. We'd actually done around about 80% of the work on that scene, and the entire thing right at the last minute, so I'll tell you about that in a second. But we ended up actually blocking out, okay, where the procession needed to go, where the camera needed to be, did a previs of the thing, and then directed it on set so that we can determine, okay, where all these light casts need to go, where the shadows need to fall from the trees onto the characters and so on, so that things interacted nicely. You got some nice light passes going across over everybody. The thing that got cut was actually inside the Kuntala base of the hills, which was one character explaining that all of the entire army is based down here because this is the weak point. We're protected by all the mountains, so nobody's ever going to invade us. Ooh, really? So that's one thing that got dropped. At this stage, we know what sort of known assets we need to create. We know what sort of stuff, based on this breakdowns, based on this information, based on the previs, based on the storyboard, we know the sort of assets that we need to do. So we can start blocking these down. It's not just characters, it's not just animals, it's properties, and so on. So at this stage, it's good to kind of get anything locked down, pre-pwned, as what one calls it here, which took me a year to what's pre-pwned mean? So all these things can actually get done very, very early on, as early as possible, so you save time, and so when the visual effects drop, you get the rushes through, you can start. You're not starting to model stuff, okay, now we need to do this. It's like, well, no, it's a little bit late, but you want to start the primary work at that particular point in stage, the rotate, the paint, the tracking, the lighting, and the comp, and the animation, and so on. This can be risky, but it can save you time in the long run. So you maybe get around about 5%, which make it, well, okay, we didn't need that, let's bin it. So you've only wasted a little bit of time as opposed to a ton of time. So things like saying, what we did in the first film, so we had mandaps, we had the elephants, we had the baby, and so on. We knew we needed to do these things as we were actually planning the shoot, when we were actually on location. So once we logged everything down, we could obviously call the studio and go, right, here's reference photographs, start work on this. It is definitely going to be needed. Same deal when we're actually going through pre-shoot before we go to floor. We can obviously determine and discuss with key departments, case in point here, costume. We obviously don't want a green mat because he's wearing green. You do get, unfortunately, in some cases, people who are wearing both blue and green, which, well, you take the lesser of two evils based on the lighting scenario and determine exactly what sort of thing you want to utilize for comp work. So that determines what sort of screen you want to use in the back. So costume color choice will obviously dictate your color choice of the chroma screen, but also take into consideration that blue reflects color, green reflects light. So when one is actually standing next to a blue screen, you'll get more of a blue spill across the person. If you're standing next to him, if it's a green mat, you'll get less color, but you'll get more light reflected. So if you see bad comps, you'll end up with a light fringe across the side. Green screen is also more, how can I put it? It reflects the same luminosity as someone with Caucasian skin as someone with a dark skin tone. primarily because of the amount of bounce that it generates. Okay, so general rule, blue screen, key the color, green, key the luminance. You can get away with murder in some areas. Then it's the case of determining and designing where you're actually going to be putting these screens based on your set design work. So what stuff is going to key off, what stuff's going to bounce, what stuff's going to have problematics. So determine on that, and this case in point, we ended up floating a lot of the screens around because of logistics. So we ended up actually shooting shots like this, actually either if it was a dull sky or if the sun was over this side, because the sun went right behind those trees, and if we had the blue mats up here, we get a massive shadow casting right across. So we end up actually restricting our shoot time purely because of restrictions on geography. And obviously final shot. Determining exactly where you want to place these things for proxies. Case in point here, we've got a box on the right-hand side, we've got the set piece on the left-hand side. We can utilize these to get artists to interact with them and to stand around them, so you're not actually getting people walking through properties. So it's good guides for them. They also cast shadows onto adjacent surfaces so that you can utilize that in your final comp and not have to rebuild those things in. Painting in light, really, really tough, bit of a pain, so you try and minimize that on set as much as possible. Sometimes you go overkill. You have to completely encase the entire set with it. This is from a film called Sri Marajan, which came out in about 2010, 2011. And you're trying to light up as much as physically possible. This is not lit properly. This is not lit properly in any way because you've got so many hard lights in this thing. You've got so many shadows, and because it's green screen, you key in the light. So therefore, this was a very, very tough shot to actually extract, as opposed to something which was, if this was blue screen, it would have been a lot easier, but you'll get a lot of spill, get a lot of blue spill in this. So it's lesser of two evils. And then you get stuff like this. Pick a screen. So this is sometimes what you actually end up getting on set because we don't have the budget for blue screens. It's cloth. How expensive is it? So yeah, don't do this. Or accept it, because at the end of the day, you're going to have a lot of problems later on, and also you're ending up with more costing in post, because you're going to have to spend more time in roto, you're going to have to spend more time in paint work, for the sake of just getting some decent color cloth and decent proper green screen or proper blue screen work. Same deal here. You notice the shadows? This is obviously green matte, so therefore one is obviously keying the light here. So many shadows here. Again, you don't want to do that. You basically want to make sure that everything is pulled tight to reduce that level of shadows which are casting within the screen. A lot of these shots, a lot of these shows, tend to run very kind of run and gun, so therefore what you end up doing is having to get these things up quickly and then they start rolling. So you need to try and maintain this on set to make sure that you are not obviously going to be creating more time and work for yourself later on. This one also tough, but it's blue. So we can obviously just kill the luminance on the entire thing and key the color and you extract a nice matte. Works every time. Other ones, a little bit more tough, but what you're trying to achieve here is trying to just at least create a matte around the edges so that one can obviously just then garbage the center point, so you're at least trying to get as much out of the edges as physically possible. This is before the days of what we had something called a LiDAR, so we actually went in and measured up all of this entire set by hand and determined exactly where every single corner was, every single point, because as a set build, it's not accurate. If it's there and it looks okay, it's okay. It's not precise. If a CAD plan says it's like 5 feet, you can guarantee it's not going to be 5 feet. It's going to be 5 feet or 4 feet, 9 inches or something like that. So if we're placing stuff in the set, we need to know exactly where it is so we can extrapolate a proper track. Doing this back then, this is like I said, this is about 2010, was very tough. During the Magadira days, everything was so problematic because we ended up having to rebuild 2 sets of sets, one for the live set, which we could then physically shift around based on the track that we tried to extrapolate, and the other one was for the full CG one, which was perfectly driven by the CAD file. So nowadays we use something called a LiDAR, and that's basically what it's doing is it's shooting out a laser, it's shooting out a point, hitting a surface, and then bouncing back. And from that time travel, it's actually determining in a physical point in space where that dot is. Do that several million times, you have a point cloud. From that point cloud, you can surface the geometry, and it comes everything to scale. Everything is great, and this comes down to like 2mm accuracy. So we even went down to the waterfalls down here, and we laser scanned that. It's like a second major job that we did. So we actually got the entire, so if Kerala Tourism is around, we have the LiDAR information for this, for sale. Anyway, moving on. So get as much information as physically possible. So your set extension builds now, you know where everything is, you know where your sets are because you've scanned them, you've got a data acquisition from this thing. You can basically start building things at this particular point in time. So you can get your set built. You've already gotten your assets, now you can start getting your sets extended, you can get your set builds going on and so on and so on. So from photographs, from the LiDAR information, you can start getting all this stuff done as early as physically possible. That's actually determined fixed. Unless it's floating. If it's floating, if it's going to move around, it's tough to extrapolate exactly where things are going to be. So get a rough version of it done, but you've got that to build later on. So you can preempt this, but it's a risk. But it's risk versus reward. What are you going to do? Do you have enough information? Are you around 80% sure that this is okay now? Yeah, fine, let's move on. So that's it, yeah? Just shoot everything and then hope it's all right? No. So you have to be there on set. You have to obviously advise. You obviously have to determine what's going to be there in the shot and determine exactly how everything needs to be filmed. Now, it's not just a case of whack a screen up and shoot against it. You end up with like a large setup to try and determine what we're going to be doing in post. And that a lot of the time is giving a director a direct representation of what something's going to look like in post. Just like Biren showed you this morning using the virtual camera system, we were doing something like that on Bolgatty, but a little bit more Heath Robinson. We were actually using the LiDAR data. We were actually just measuring up where the camera needed to be. There are technology advances since then using something called the NCAN system, which is basically using tracking markers and a device bolted to the camera so one can actually create a virtual version, a live virtual version of this out even in the field. So this was not that. This was us measuring up and then another guy in the cabin physically placing the camera and using a mixer and going, right, that's what your extension is going to be like for this frame so that the DP can therefore compose the shot. And that was called the lovely visual effects pit of fun, which was not a toilet. That was there for like 3 weeks. So during the shoot itself, you're trying to note everything down. You're trying to log every single piece of information. You're trying to get as much reference for the artists who are obviously not there to try and get everything down so that the information that you're producing is actually be able to be replicated back at the studio. So it's logging down camera positions, it's logging down timings, actions, slate numbers, clip numbers, etc., lensing, any issues with that particular shot, noting down everything to the nth degree. And that can take time. That's, that number of log sheets was just around a third of what we did for EGA. So every single sheet needs to be scanned in and then collaborated with reference photographs and so on and so on. So it's a lot of information to try and collate together. And obviously, human error, you sometimes get some mixes up and you have to deep dive back into the log sheets. And it's time consuming. So we built a system that we could obviously just produce everything directly on set. Everything was collated together. We use mobile devices and iPads, etc., to actually be able to log all the information. And using the clinometer on it, we can work out camera angles, we can work out orientation, we can work out positioning. We're drawing diagrams directly on the device, and that just chucks out as a CSV file, it chucks out as a PDF. And we went through like 3 iterations of this so that in essence we're using, again, designing in essence a traffic light system. If green, it's good, you don't need to worry about it. Amber, something needs to be addressed. Red, you've not filled this in. Very, very simple, very straightforward. At a glance, you know where you are. So the game is try and fill everything out. Get as much information in there as you physically can so that if you filled it out, the artist is going to be able to replicate it very, very straightforward. So when you're on set, you're actually having this constant thought in your head, right, if I had to do the shot myself, what would I have to do? What would I actually have to achieve? What would I need to be able to do this thing? So you're constantly going through the battle of, right, if I'm in this department, have I got this information? If I'm going through this department, have I got this information? And so on and so on. And there's like 8 to 10 departments. And constantly you're having to think about this, especially when the director goes, right, we want to do this shot, what do you do? And on the spot, you need to immediately come up with a solution. Like you've done that shot a million times before, but obviously, you know, each shot's unique. But there are similarities to what one tends to do previously. Planning all these things does tend to reduce any kind of variables. So you're going through location scouts, determining, discussing, and obviously all this pre-prep that I've been talking about has helped reduce all those matters. So if you're going to floor, or there's the age-old battle, if you go to war without a battle plan, you're going to lose. So all this pre-prep is to try and determine your battle plan, exactly what you're going to be achieving at the end of the day, so everybody's on the same page. I keep harking on about it, but this really does save you time. It saves you money, it saves you hair. I had hair when I came here, believe it or not. There are a lot of cases on sets when you do determine, you do have some unknown variables. Things tend, what's going on here? You do get a lot of unknown factors, like suddenly a director goes, this angle, this idea that we had, it's not working, so let's try this. Let's try something else. Like, this is an unknown variable. I never saw the screen move. Why are we over here now? Okay. You changing it or something? Yeah, so, oh, the screen's flashing, that's why. Is that me? Bouncing up and down? So, unknown variables, yeah, who would foresee that? That was perfectly cute, that was. So you're trying to get as much information down so you're not trying to, have a lot of experimentation or trying to shoot for coverage and trying to shoot for edit. You're trying to get as much physically down as possible so that you know exactly what you're going to be doing at the end of the day. So trying to restrict that first item, reducing the on-spot experimentation, which is a case of like, we want to achieve this shot, how do you do it? It's like, well, we never discussed this, but let's try this. So you always get that. You always get the experimentation, you always get it. If you reduce it, then what you end up doing is your shoot doesn't extend. And the majority of your film's budget is going to be spent on the floor. Try and keep everything neat. Okay, this, the age-old adage of, a place for everything and everything in its place. So determining everything that needs to be physically there should be there. Last thing you want to do is spend half of your visual effects budget on cleaning things up that are unnecessary. The worst 4 words uttered are fix it in post. It's a waste of time. No, just tidy things up before you roll. Treat visual effects shoot like it's 1950. VFX doesn't exist. Special effects do, but it's very expensive and time consuming. So spend the time, get it right, then roll. Because at the end of the day, the last thing you want to basically do is to clean up a lot of stuff. We came out of one show a couple of months ago where 50% of the visual effects work that we had to do for that show was cleanup. Removing properties that were not supposed to be there, cleaning out wires, moving production vehicles. Not just cleaning out a blue screen or anything like that, or adding in a property. It was literally cleaning things up, which someone could do on set without any problem whatsoever. Just go around and clean things up. In some shots, we had gas cylinders visibly there in frame, big. Actors and secondary artists, chapels lying around on the floor. It's like, it's a period film from like 200 years ago. Why on earth are there rubber chapels lying on the floor in the shot? Oh, you guys clean it up. Okay, I'll happily take your money, but I shouldn't need to. And also, your VFX budget is this much, you are diluting it. Put the money into things that are necessary. Spend more time on the stuff, and as opposed to the VFX prep work, which is the cleanup, etc. So, out of that stuff that I just showed you just now, this is in essence the final. So we've got a lot more kind of cleaned up here. We've obviously replaced a lot of the visual effects buildings, but you've also noticed there's a lot more debris on the top. This was a film called Carla, and unfortunately the art director did not dirty up all the roofs, which would have taken a grand total of maybe around 30 minutes or a night to dirty everything up before they actually went for the shoot the following day. So we actually ended up having to spend 2 weeks dirtying the live set up, which is crazy. It's a waste of time, it's a waste of money. And we're getting yelled at because apparently it was our fault that we didn't dirty the setup. That's kind of crazy. But that happened. It's like, it's unnecessary work for one to do when our drive is to match the live set, extend the live set. If the live set's clean, unless we're told otherwise, we'll do it. Anyway, ran over. So preempting the workload really, really helps here. Again, using that set as an example, if we'd been informed that we needed to dirty everything up, then we could have planned that into the budget, we could have planned it into the schedule, we could have planned it into our entire workload. Unfortunately, that was not done. So knowing exactly what you need to do really, really helps you with your schedule and your planning. This shot, for example, like that, was we knew exactly what was required. We knew what was necessary for this particular shot. We knew how close we needed to be, and we know where everything needs to happen. That is clean. Everything is neat. You've got all this garbage on the right-hand side. That's matted out. Very simple, very straightforward. So the end shot comes clean. It comes very, very nice and neat, and there's no surprises. There's no stuff that we have to make up on the spot or prep work that one needs to do. So prepping everything and planning everything on the spot, you know, you should be as descriptive as you can. You need to know exactly what needs to be happening. So don't leave things in the air. Don't leave things as variables. Get decisions made on the spot, because everybody's mind is in that environment and in that world and in that moment. If you're asking somebody that question maybe a month later, they'd be like, let's talk about it when we actually start seeing it and we can take those decisions then. No, you want to get them while everybody's mind is actually in the zone at that particular point in time. So what we ended up doing, especially on the waterfall episode, is to get a concept artist who's hidden away underneath a couple of flags there, to actually block out shots, take single frames from the actual footage and sketch over it and give an idea to the director, right, is this the sort of thing you want? So he'd bang one of these out in 20 minutes. For each key angle, so when Prabhas is doing his little dance at the bottom of the waterfall and he's carrying the Sivalingam to the waterfall, or when we've got the nice kind of tilt up and we're seeing that 5-kilometer high structure, where does it start? What's the composition look like? How big or how thick do these waterfalls need to be? Where do we need to extend from? So we're blocking all this stuff out. So we know exactly what visual we need to achieve back on the set, and the director can make an immediate decision because his mind is in the moment. We know exactly what he needs to achieve there. So once you've got everything, you come back from set, you're collating everything, you're consolidating all your information, so you know exactly then where things need to go, organize it, again, a place for everything and everything in its place, so that the artist can find things at the drop of a hat. At this stage, you want to go through something called post-viz. You have something called pre-viz before. This is post-viz, obviously, because it's after the initial shoot. So this determines your final load requirements, clarifies everything, determines final department loads, locks creative decisions as much as possible, and reduces the chances of change. So blocking everything down really, really helps things at this particular point in time. Trying to get everything nailed and trying to determine any of your technical issues is also really, really going to help at this stage as well. So we've got the rampart at the bottom, the final shot, and the one at the input at the top here, which was actually shot on like a 290-foot stage, but we had like a 100-foot working area because of cranes, stunt crew, etc. So can anybody tell me, quick question, what was the most complicated technically within that single sequence? Anybody? Yeah, I've got a hand there. Yeah. Sorry, mate? The drop? Nope. Anyone else? Sorry? Nope. Next. I'm sorry, what? Nope. What about them? What about the soldiers at the back? Nope. 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 Hey, oh, ow, jeez, ow. Someone's shuffles, very good. Someone's been listening. Nope. Next. Nope. No, no, and no. Right, I'm going to run this again. Right. Every single one of those archers at the back is not firing an arrow. Every single one of the archers at the back here is firing an arrow. So not only did the camera need to be tracked, every single archer's hand position in 3 stages, from here to here, the draw and the release, had to be manually animated for every single archer. Okay? That's all background stuff. You don't see it really, but everything, that's all happening. If I put this big screen, go watch the film again tonight, you'll see every single one of those guys is firing an arrow. We can't do it on set because, well, someone will have died. The green screen would have been damaged. Which one would be worse, I'm not sure. But we didn't have that many arrows either. So that was the most technical for us. It was the most problematic. We knew we had a lot of this work to do. So the prep work for this was 3.5 months just to get all those guys animated, all those characters, and hand done. Okay? So checking stuff and determining load well in advance as much as possible so you can plan a team to basically sit down and just block through all this and do it as much as possible. The unforeseen element was Prabhas damaging his shoulder really, really badly to a point where he couldn't lift anything heavy above this level. So that's the reason why he's not having a full shield here. We had to replace the shield. And that's literally because he was in so much pain. I mean, the guy was a machine. He literally, he's like, dude, go to a doctor. No, need to finish the shot. Okay, all right. But so he ended up cutting, he took the shield. Is it too, yeah, hurting. Right, remove some. Hurting? Yeah. Remove more. Is that okay? Yeah. Okay, let's go with that. So we ended up with smaller pieces just for something to him to grab and something for us for reference. And That was, again, unforeseen work, but we had the property done for other shots already, so it wasn't that much of a big deal, that one. Then you get the fun stuff. This is what we call the Angry Birds shot. Because at this stage in the production, this is around January time when we got this and we'd shot it, you just want to kill things. So at this particular point, the director's like, you're going to give me brains on the wall? You're going to give me an A certificate? We're like, no, it's okay, don't worry about it. So we really, really wanted to try and produce a shot that you had to watch around about 5 or 6 times to determine exactly everything that was happening. So you can see there in the screen exactly how far away that green screen was from that rampart wall. So if the guys have had arrows, you can obviously tell, it's very, very, very close. They would have damaged it. So at this particular stage, we really want to just smash things into sminge, because that's always fun. Building sets and doing little animations is all nice, but at the end of the day, we want to, you want to smash things into things, because that's always entertaining. So at this stage, now you know everything that needs to happen. You can go through a budget revisal at this point. These are the additional things that we didn't anticipate on set. These are the additional things the client has asked for. These are the additional stuff that, the technical issues that we encountered. So therefore, you want to achieve this, then there has to be a revisal. That's perfectly fair. That's perfectly us. It's like going, asking for a house to be built and then going, well, actually, I need a swimming pool on the roof. You're changing the design direction, so therefore one obviously has to, a cost is going to incur. So one obviously needs to make sure that somebody is obviously following through with the monetary aspect of it. So from this, again, you're constantly filling out this sheet, you're constantly filling out these assessments and the requirements. And by this particular point in time, you can basically fill through everything. The producer's getting happy because you're seeing exposure, you're seeing progression, everything is logged down and things are moving forward. Again, if you've got everything, if you start out with this process, you won't get lost by this single stage. Because when you're in post-production, you really need to know where everything is, otherwise you will get lost and something will get missed, which is always really, really bad if that happens. There's always the trick of find something wrong. It's well, nobody likes that. So one of the problems on this particular show we had was actually try and get that realism of gravity and realism of dynamics. Like the entire thing of Katapa jumping down, we actually just had him on a wire and lowered him down. The dude's 60. We can't drop him that much. So obviously you have to ramp it down and so on, okay? But we need to understand how gravity works, so we ended up throwing a bag off the top of our building, just to kind of get the right amount of gravity and the right amount of pace and impact going on, just to try and get that emulation as much as close as possible. So that's all live action stuff, crossover work. You also end up doing a lot of full CG work, which is in essence everything is designed within the computer, everything is animated within there, lit, rendered, and so on. So this is just one example of the 2.0 titles that we did. The same process applies here. You go through the animatic stage. You don't necessarily go through the storyboard stage, you can, but sometimes it's easier just to go straight into animatic stage and block all that stuff out and determine exactly everything regarding timing, where things need to happen, composition needs to happen, lensing, etc., etc. So it becomes not easier. This actually can be a lot more difficult because you have that variable, you have that unknown variable of well, it's fully CG. We can do whatever we like. Yes, that's true, you can, but at the end of the day, you still want to lock these things down. You don't want to obviously start changing things mid-process, and definitely not right at the end, which happened with this. The production department at the end decided to start juggling the name directions around, started adding in additional names and adding in additional cards when we've already locked the entire background sequence. So we end up with a missed time, and this is in 3 languages. So I've got 3 sets of titles, and it's in stereo. So you've got 2 eyes, 2 sets of renders for this, plus obviously the name changes, etc., etc. So you try and lock things down as much as you can, but obviously you still get these unknown variables at the end of the day. This is for a film called Syra, which came out recently. So this was actually the input plate. This is the thing that, I say, we had a fair amount of cleanup here. This is straightforward, but again, you can move these vans. These vans, these generators can get shifted out the way. It's unnecessary. You don't need to have them there. They can be behind camera. And the unknown variable that we actually had in this was this. This is obviously a very well-known canyon that we had to replicate based out of Canal. And this had to go in, lead directly into the live shot with all the extension work. Now, our work was this environment plus the entire scene. That entire canyon came to us 4 days before our delivery. So we had 4 days to recreate that entire canyon itself. And thankfully, this entire thing, I'd actually been there about 9 years earlier, so I had a load of reference photographs. Second thing was that we had some drone footage, so we ended up kit bashing and going down to Ramogi Film City and shooting some rocks which were very similar to the kind of rock formations that you saw in the background, and taking drone footage and generating a photogrammetry from that and reprojecting that onto geometry that we then flew through. And the worst thing was, you never saw this. Because from here, prior to that, it was cut. So, and then from here, you never saw it. And all the reason for that was right at the last minute, after they'd gone through all this process, we've gotten previs, blocking it out, doing animatics, blocking everything, sending it across, direction department approval, yada, yada, yada. There was one variable that we didn't know about, because we get the edit length through that we tried to match, which is what we matched exactly. The variable was they hadn't put the audio track of the voiceover artist over the top. So what they ended up doing was having to chop the beginning and chop the end, so they just had this section in there. And we couldn't ask, it was Pavan Kalyan or Kamal Hassan, who did the 2 languages for this thing, to re-record their dialogue. And they just laid that in right at the last minute. So unfortunately, the beginning portion and the end portion got chopped. And we didn't know about this until we saw it at the theater, which is like, what? So the fun thing was is that this beginning portion, you saw it in the trailer. You only saw from here in the film. So yeah, these things happen, unfortunately. There was one film, so yeah, going back, so this is in essence the process. You've gone through all this thing, you've gone through pre-visualization, you've gone through all this pre-prep stage, you've gone through your shoot, you've gone through your lighting, your rendering, your comp, you've gone through to your final, and you got your delivery. Again, these things sometimes work well, sometimes fail. So it's all a development and it's all a learning process. The primary thing really is trying to deliver obviously something that you're happy with, the client's happy with, the producer's happy with. So, you know, there was one show that we did, well I did, sorry, which was the first Robo film. I did that, there was one sequence where Ash kisses him on the cheek and then we go inside his head and there's butterflies and all this other kind of stuff and it leads into a song with robotic tigers or something. Yeah, don't ask me about that. So that portion, I spent 7 months working on. 3 months of it was cut. I still got paid, which is always nice, but it's sad to see that amount of work. It's like, dude, I want you to see it. I want you to see this stuff. I want I want everybody to enjoy it, whether or not it's ramped or not. But that decision was actually made by the editor right at the last minute. When I've been sending these animatics, I've been sending these previs works for months, and only at the last minute was the decision made to chop it, which was very, very heartbreaking. So when it comes to the final process, which is digital intermediate, which in essence is coloring, you can make sure that obviously everything's nicely blended together. I mean, generally, rule of thumb here in India is that you don't touch the live action. If you touch the live action, then that's sacrosanct. You are actually, it's like defacing the Bible or something. So the DP tends to shout at you quite considerably if you affect its colors. So we try and make things seamless by trying to blend the visual effects of the the CG into the actual live plate itself. So case in point here, the only primary work that we did on this was obviously the entire background, but all this here was obviously blue screened off. And if you look at this particular shot, which is in the first film, when old Devasena, who's chained up picking up sticks and stuff, that opening shot is not looking like this. It actually has got a major matte problem, which is like right across here, because they did a general color grade over it, and they didn't apply it to the correct matte. And they made a mistake in DI. So even though we balanced everything neatly, in DI it got screwed up. Again, we saw it and went, what? Months, like 3 months for this shot. And then right at the last minute, it's broken. So that, again, it's like a right in the heart. It happens. So you try your best, you try and get everything obviously sorted down. But there's a general rule of thumb within the film industry, and it's like a film is never completed, it's just released. It's the same deal with visual effects. I mean, cripes, it took Da Vinci 4 years to do the Mona Lisa. And I'm not saying our work is as good as his in any way, shape, or form, but one tends to strive for perfection. One tends to try and, we would still be working on Eager if we had the chance and an unlimited budget. We'd still be working on that thing, trying to make everything as perfect as we physically could. So how do you succeed? How do you try and drive this forward? So you practice, you experiment, you go through all these development processes, you fail. It's part of the creative process. You do. I've failed more times than I've succeeded, but I've learned from them. The trick is not to try and fail twice. So you practice and you experiment and so on and so on and so on, because it's art. And at the end of the day, it's, in an artistic environment, in any form of filmmaking, visual effects, design, development, the most important thing above all when you're doing this stuff is not only you're producing something for the end result, that the client's going to be happy, you're going to be happy. The most important thing for you as creatives is that you should have fun. Thank you. Any questions? I was going to skip forward these things and I'll just show you the kind of the inputs for that particular shot that I just showed you there. It's like nothing here and so on and so on and so on. But I'll quickly just skip through to here. So anybody got any questions? Can I have lights, please? Preferably not in my eyes. I'm blind.
Audience lights.
We failed to pay the electricity bill or something?
We could also do with less lights on the stage, maybe?
Yeah, my retinas are burning right now.
This is all.
This is what we got? Okay, right. Anyone got any questions then? Yes.
Yes. A microphone is coming to you.
Mic's coming to you.
Hello.
Hey.
Hi. So how do you keep your team on the same page when on a bigger project like Bahubali?
Torture. No. Can be. It's trying to get everybody focused into the world. So we try and get everybody on set. We try and get them involved as much as physically possible. This obviously doesn't happen with every single show, but we try and get people to do set visits. We try and get the actors to interact with the key staff, and those key staff to get encouraged and involved within the development of it. So it's enthusiasm. Every project we deal with, we try and immerse ourselves into that world. So with Bolgatty was like 4 years of our lives. Originally it was one film. Then they told us there's 2 films. We're like, what? Okay. I'm getting paid for more years. Lovely. But you try and get everybody involved in it as much as physically possible, and try and, like I say, try and get everybody within that psyche, if you like. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
You said arrow shot is the most difficult shot.
No. I say it wasn't it was not the most difficult shot in any way.
Yeah,
it was a tough one.
It
was a tough one because of the amount of technical issues that were with it. Because we had this big, long, single rampart shot. We had 290 feet of floor space, 120 feet of working space, and we had to stitch multiple cameras, multiple formats. So you're going from Phantom to Red camera to Alexa, this grip to that grip to this grip, depending on the camera action that was happening. That was technically challenging, but that was planned well in advance by the fight choreographer. So he'd already done what's called a stunt viz, blocked everything out, knows where everything needed to go, what camera needed to go from this transition point to this transition point, to try and stitch everything together within that single space. So liaising with that department, we knew where we needed to have our ins and our outs and our overlaps, where certain things needed to happen. So again, planning. If we just shot it and then went, right, let's sort all this out afterwards, we'd be lost.
Is it easier to just replace that shot by shooting it again and replacing that, like the hand action thing? You said the hand action had to be manually done by CG.
No, it wasn't the hand action that needed to be. It was basically the arrow. The arrow had to be manually placed. The arrow had to be replaced.
Okay.
Yeah. So that, again, because of logistics and safety and so on, we could have shot this thing outside, but then we're restricted by, we can't put gantries up, it's not a controlled environment, the light's changing every single shot, problematic there. So too many variables going to happen. You want to have it in a controlled space, which is what that was. But again, you're limited because of geography. The studio floor was, like I say, it was 290 feet long, which is a large space, but you're still restricted by other things in there, camera crew, grips, cranes for the ropes and the wires and everything else like that having to be wheeled in there and so on. So.
The last one, the lighting, how do you determine?
Let him have one, let him have one more, go on.
The lighting, you can have it beautifully presented using different lighting, right? You can have it like, for example, for a particular shot, it can be beautifully presented in two variations of lighting. So how do you determine which one is better?
That's the DP's decision. That's the DP's decision. I have my view on lighting. I have my own aesthetical choice depending on the mood for the shot. When it comes to doing a full CG shot, for example, we have to follow the tone and the palette and the style, even matching things like, for example, virtual cameras for shutter angles, focusing, hyperfocal distances, etc. All this stuff we have to match the rest of the tone of the film. The tone of the film, if you notice, everything is very staccato. The DP did not shoot anything greater than a 90-degree shutter, which means everything is very, very hyper-realistic. So not only is the fight sequence is very staccato with regards to the lensing and the framing and the shutter angles. There's very little blurring or anything like that. It looks like something from the Bourne series. But even the actual main drama portions are also like that as well. And for CG, that's horrible for us to do. Because we love blur, because blur, you hide the problems. So when we first started filming this, like, dude, you're shooting this on a 22.5 degree shutter. What the heck? He's like, oh yeah, full film will be like that. What? We've got 4 years of this? Shit. Yeah, so, yeah. Triple R, thankfully, is not like that.
I'm sorry, I really wanted just, one more person to ask a question if there's anybody at all.
Any other questions? Yeah, one at the back.
Okay.
Okay.
Microphone is coming, just a second.
I actually wanted to ask, like, what sort of machines do you use for rendering like such high definition?
As much as you can.
Like
as many high-powered systems as you can. I mean, this is the things like.
Do you pool cloud computers? Or
right.
do you have
Okay.
local computers?
Yeah, I got you. So we have our in-house farm, which, by today's standards, we bought this stuff like back in 2012, so it's kind of archaic by today's standards. It still works. The memory's like 32 gig, 64 gig systems that we use for render farms. Like I say, if I had the budget, everybody would be on like the highest spec known to man, but we're not Hollywood. We're Telugu market. So we try and use what we've got. Okay, corners we sometimes cut with regards to spec, but we try not to compromise on the quality as much as we, as much as we can. You want to throw every single setting possible at it to get the best quality, and then you end up with like a 13-hour render time for one frame, for one layer, which is not viable. We'd still be rendering eager now if that was the case, which again, it's not a viable thing when you're going into delivery. So this happens not just with us, it happens with every single VFX studio, it happens with this worldwide. One of my friends, a guy called Tom Martinek, he works at ILM, and he did one big sequence in Noah, which was like large crane shot with the full menagerie of animals traveling into the ark. And he's like, oh God, this thing's taking forever. So he's like, right, okay, I got the render time down to 2.5 hours. It's like, what do you do? I turned off the shadows. So there's no shadows in any of the hair systems, which is, again, that's computationally expensive. So you just flip that off. Can you see any difference? Nah, 50-50. It's like, if you look really closely, maybe, but is anybody going to notice? No, okay, fine. If you don't see, if it looks right, it's right. You'll fudge and fake as much as you physically can. Like, there's the shot where in the first film where Prabhas jumps from one side of the rock to the other side of the rock. Again, no one's doing spoilers. Sorry. And somebody about a week after the film got released went, right, so I've worked out the physics on this, and he would be dead. He wouldn't make it. We're like, we know. The film would be really short. It's like, dead. It wouldn't last 5 seconds. So yeah, of course he's got to make it. Seriously. So yeah, is it believable? Does it look cool? Yeah. That's what you want to go and see, yeah? You don't want to see like, shit, and then dead. We've already done the bit earlier on in the film. So, you try and do your best with the systems that you've got. You try and do the best with the equipment that you have. If you've, it's not a case of like, okay, someone said earlier, garbage in, garbage out. Okay, that's true, but it's also a case of what can you do with what you have? If you're only working with garbage, can you polish it? Make it look cool? And do the best that you can with the equipment that you have available. So, there are corners that one can cut. Like, in some cases, in some shots, so we've shifted a lot of our pipeline across to Blender now. So we've gone from being primarily a Mac studio, we're shifting across to Blender. And primarily because 2.8 is lovely, really nice. The renderer is lovely on it. It's quick. I can run everything on Linux. And as a result, my render times reduce by around up to 50%. Just because of it's a path tracer as opposed to a ray tracer. And the second thing is because it's Linux. It's not a CPU hog like Windows is. So 30% straight away because I just shifted OS. It's like having 30 extra systems. It was crazy. So evaluation, determination, decision, and therefore obviously you can take a call on this thing. Has there been problems? Yeah. Are there limitations in some aspects? Definitely. But it also has a very nice real-time rendering engine within there, which I can get away with using for background buildings. So my foreground buildings just need to be path traced. My background buildings, which can be rendered out in a separate path, can be just done as a baked Eevee render, for example. you get what you've got. You know, you try and make the most of it. Yeah. I think that's it. Any more? Everybody want coffee? Yeah. Okay, thank you.